This is Montreal, Canada's second largest metro area with over 4.4 million residents that's historically been known for its vibrant art scene, world-class festivals, and unique European charm. But it's also known for having the worst roads of any Canadian city, some of the worst traffic known to the country, brutal winters that last months, and decaying infrastructure that's become a hazard to its residents. And more recently, Montreal's seen a number of violent riots, increases in general crime, and a cost of living crisis that's pushed homelessness to new heights in the only French-Canadian province, reaching over 10,000 homeless people as of 2022. The government of Quebec has now committed $410 million to combat homelessness over the next 5 years, and the city of Montreal has committed a combined $12 million in 2025 to combat the rising homelessness problem. But despite these funds being earmarked, the problem seems to persist even further as tensions with Montreal's residents have been growing, and social workers on the front lines of homelessness in Montreal say they feel increasingly powerless. But the thing is, headlines only cover a part of the story, right? So I'll be driving a couple of hours from Ottawa over to Montreal to see if things truly are as bad as they seem in the news, at least on the surface driving around town. And for the record, I actually lived in Montreal back in 2018 for all of around 6 months, and based on the comments that I've received from many of you on my last video driving around Ottawa, things seem to have gotten quite a bit worse in Montreal as well over the past couple of years. And actually, now would be a good time to mention that I've booked flights to Vancouver and Calgary next week to make a series of videos traveling the country and documenting what life's become living in Canada's largest cities. So make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you're notified of those upcoming videos. Alright, so we're driving to Montreal here. It's about a 2-hour drive, and in the meantime, I wanted to hit you with a couple financial facts that I printed out here, starting with the housing market. So Montreal is actually a little bit lower than the average in Canada, especially in Ontario and BC. So actually, the average sold price as of November 2024, which is the latest data that I had access to, $642,000 and some change. So a bit lower than the national average. However, that is also even skewed upwards by multiplexes. So Montreal is a city that has a ton of multiplexes, duplex, triplex, all the way up to multi 5, 6, 7 units. And that average sold price is $770,000, skewing that number upwards. The average single family home sold price for that month, $600,000, so quite a bit lower than the national average. And condo price, average sold price, $425,000, with a price graph for the Montreal housing market that looks like this. I'll put it on screen. So we can see it's actually at the highest point it has ever been, even surpassing February 2022, which was when rates were a lot lower. So we're seeing prices increase once again. And honestly, this is a testament to the fact that the housing supply is still in a period of demand where there is more demand than the supply that can be brought to the city, especially considering Quebec and Montreal are known for having a lot of red tape when it comes to development. Now, when it comes to rent, Montreal has also been victim to increasing rent prices. So for example, unfurnished one-bedroom rents rose by $152 per month compared to December 2023, so 1 year prior, which is up quite a bit. And rents also grew $98 from June to December 2024, which is up 6%. So we're seeing rental prices on the rise as well as real estate prices on the rise, which is impacting, of course, the level of homelessness as well that we're seeing in Montreal, which is actually even higher than Vancouver, which is known for having some of the worst homelessness in Canada. So with that said, we're on our way to Montreal. We're gonna see if it's actually as bad as a lot of you have commented on my previous video telling me to come to Montreal. Also, I'll take a quick second here to mention, if you're interested in getting free money for opening up like a stock brokerage account, make sure to check out the links down below in this video's description. You can get free money for opening up a Moomoo account. And if you wanna learn how to invest in the stock market, I have a full free to consume course. It's totally free on Skillshare, has over 3,000 students, 7 hours of content. Check that out, link So after roughly a 2.5 hour drive, getting off of the highway here, this is our first glimpse at Montreal in the winter. So keep in mind, this is right after a small snow squall though of about 10 centimeters or about, a couple inches essentially. So this is really giving you a raw look at what Montreal looks like on an average winter day in one of the residential neighborhoods. And keep in mind here that in my last video where we're driving around Ottawa and Gatineau, I was showing what a lot of those new construction buildings looked like, where I found they looked quite dystopian. That being said, as we're driving through Montreal here, keep in mind this is kind of just what Montreal looks like in general. Narrow streets as well as a lot of multiplex properties like I was mentioning earlier, right? So most of all of these parts of Montreal were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s up into the 70s, and they are multi-family properties. A lot of what's getting built now though on the island, or at least closer to the center town, are going to be these more dense multi-units that have maybe 100, 200 units and up to 10, 15 floors, if not even being somewhat skyscrapers. But yeah, so the goal here is really just to drive around and show you the raw take on what an average day in Montreal looks like. So enjoy and make sure to comment your thoughts down below. But I mean, truth be told, that's kind of just the reality of living in Canada though, and people who live here are used to it. But for people who aren't from here, it's definitely a huge shock. Oh, the roads are bad, eh? Yeah. So yeah, this is pretty much life in Montreal on a Thursday at noon in mid-January. So, the goal of these videos was really just to turn the camera on and kind of just have raw footage driving around, seeing what the cities are looking like right now. So I hope you like these videos. If you do, make sure to drop a like. It takes a second. Consider subscribing to the channel as well, because like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're going to be going to Vancouver next week, Calgary, and then we're going to be doing Toronto as well. So if you're interested in seeing those videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And we're actually going straight. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell button so you're notified of those upcoming videos. And if you're from Montreal, by the way, let me know, how do you like living in Montreal and how has it evolved over the past couple of years? I'd love to know down in the comments. In general, at least in this area, a lot of the retail does seem to be occupied, which is definitely a good thing to see. Not seeing many vacant buildings right now, which is a huge difference from in Ottawa, as we saw in the video from last week. So at least that's good to see. Definitely pretty run down. A lot of graffiti here. It's pretty wild. And I know Montreal is actually known for its graffiti culture, but it's actually pretty crazy. Imagine we pull up, it's closed. Where is it? So right now we're on a street called Avenue du Parc, basically Park Avenue, and for the most part I haven't really seen any homelessness actually. There are quite a few shops that are closed down. There's a lot of vacant units. However, I feel like that's maybe just like a Montreal-ish thing, maybe? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but there just seems to be a lot more retail available. So there are a lot of businesses open as well. But in terms of a high number of closed down businesses, I wouldn't necessarily say that, even though there are a lot of vacant and rundown. Actually, I say that and there's like 5 in a row. But yeah, so this is Park Avenue. There's definitely a lot more one-off restaurants though, and bakeries and coffee shops here in Montreal than in Ottawa, at least. Is something that I'm noticing. So actually the street we're on right now, we're coming into the city, and this is one of the streets that a couple months ago there was a huge rally. Essentially there was a strike, the teachers in Quebec. That was right here. I'll put some shots of that. Essentially pretty much every group of individuals in Quebec, they rotate going on strike. Now I'm not saying that teachers shouldn't be paid more, that's a different story, but that's pretty much where this was. And a lot of the riots and stuff happened right down here. The shots that we'll put on screen, a lot of that happened down in the core that we're going to right now. Where is that? We'll have to figure that one out. Yeah. Holy cow, the potholes here? Whoa.
All things considered, you drove on very main streets and didn't really see anything.
That's the one that got defaced, but it's not defaced anymore. Yeah, this whole block here that we just went by is pretty much entirely vacant. That building, that one. There's pretty much only a Doc Martin and an Exchange FX shop that's in business. Oh man, right here that's vacant. On the other side it's vacant as well. This whole block here is under construction. The entire block, actually. Got another vacancy here. Yeah, I'd say maybe like 50% is vacant, actually. Whoop. Over here as well, got some more vacancies. I mean, it's definitely bumping more than Ottawa, for sure. But there are quite a few vacancies, actually. Haven't seen any mushroom shops yet, though, which are becoming like pretty prevalent in Ottawa. One thing I've definitely noticed though about Montreal upon driving here is that as opposed to Ottawa, like of course here on the main St. Catherine Street, there are a lot of chains, of course, chain restaurants, Aritzia, stores I should say, Aritzia, Red Sack, Jack and Jones, things that we recognize. However, there's a lot more mom and pop restaurants and just small shops kind of scattered all over Montreal as opposed to Ottawa, which is mainly just big RioCan centers peppered around the city in the different suburbs. So yeah, that's definitely a little difference for sure. So at this point, we had driven around multiple neighborhoods in the city, as well as many of the main streets, both in residential neighborhoods, as well as more down in the downtown core. And it was becoming really evident that there were actually no homeless people anywhere. We didn't see a single encampment in any of the dozens of parks that we drove through, any of the side streets. We only saw a couple people walking around, but even still, it really wasn't an issue at all, as we had come to see in Ottawa. All right, so now we're in an area called Place d'Armes, which is also right beside Chinatown here. So we can see condos for sale right here. I'm gonna pull up how much these condos go for. I'm assuming at least probably $500,000 for like a 1-bedroom condo, but we'll take a look. Now, over here, this is probably one of the only areas though where we've seen a little bit more, homelessness, unfortunately, due to the fact there is a mission back there though, so at least, hopefully they're getting the help that they are requiring. Alright, so based on my findings, was Montreal actually as bad as I was expecting based on the news and people's comments online? The short answer is no, not at all, especially for just everyday residents going about their day. It actually felt pretty clean and safe. In fact, although it didn't look like it in the clips, there were way more people just walking around town than I was even expecting, and this is despite it being pretty cold and windy that day as well. I mean, we're in mid-January right now. It really made Ottawa, where I'm from, from feel quite empty in the downtown core. Now, from a retail vacancy standpoint, I was also expecting there to be far more boarded up and just vacant properties waiting for tenants, but there seemed to be a lot more business in general across the city in the parts at least that I toured than say Ottawa's downtown and surrounding areas. That's definitely struggling a bit more right now. Otherwise, there were very few cannabis shops, and I realized halfway through that this is because Quebec actually provincially regulates and takes care of the sale of cannabis, unlike Ontario, where you get a license as a private retailer. So that makes sense, and zero mushroom shops, at least none that we saw in the downtown core and surrounding areas either. But what surprised me the most was that in the couple of hours that we were walking and driving around the city, we saw almost no homeless people and a total of zero outdoor encampments, except for a couple people standing outside one mission that we drove by, which realistically though is where you'd expect them to be anyways. So I did a bit more research while we were there, and apparently during the winter when it gets real cold, people flock to shelters, and these areas Montreal's set up called heating rooms, which is of course a great initiative, but the emergency rooms in hospitals as well as metro stations underground also seemingly attract homeless people due to them being heated public areas, which actually, come to think of it, had reminded me of when I used to live in Montreal. I would commute to work using the metro system, and yeah, there were always dozens of homeless people in the Montreal Underground, as it's called, but I toured those two stations that I would use primarily back in the day as well, and there were no homeless people at all, which is surprising. So considering there's said to be thousands of homeless people in Montreal, it would appear, from my quick assessment, mind you, that the millions of dollars that are being put towards the issue are at least doing some good, as the streets and parks as of January 2025, they are not filled with encampments like here in Ottawa Gatineau, which actually I drove by the main encampments once again the other day because they happened to be on my way, and things were even worse than I had documented in my video from last week. Way more tense, dozens of shipment containers converted into housing. So that was quite surprising to see as well, considering Gatineau only has around 300,000 people. So even though there are thousands and thousands of people without a home, unfortunately, in Montreal, it doesn't seem as prevalent as just an everyday resident or tourist walking around town. So all of that to say, Montreal, you seem to be doing something right. Keep pushing in the right direction, as I'm not sure the same will be true next week when I fly to Vancouver. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on that one. Thanks for watching. See you next week.